What's up, guys? All right, so first lesson we're going to get into is the first lesson of the new unit after World War II, and that is the Cold War unit. So, just to kind of give you guys a refresher of where we left off when we were doing new material, we did the whole World War One unit. Then we talked about Germany and Europe between the world wars. We talked about the effects of the Depression and things like that, nationalism, the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy, and then we got into some World War II. We talked about D-Day. We talked about all those turning points and things like that. So at the end of World War II, the Allies are victorious, and the Allies, just to refresh your memory, are the U.S., the USSR, France, and Great Britain. So after the Allies are victorious at the end of World War II, it is up to, we then enter this bizarre period where the United States and the USSR are going to compete with each other for world supremacy. And that sounds absurd, but that's literally what's happening. It's the US versus the USSR to see who's going to dominate the world. And that's going to shape history for the next 40, 50 years. And that's what this unit is all about, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is how did the Cold War impact Berlin and Germany specifically. So this is kind of the first events of the Cold War, as it's called. And it's called the Cold War because it's not necessarily a war where two sides line up and kill each other. This is more of a war of ideas. And I'll show you what exactly we mean here. So these are like the big themes of the unit. It's the US versus USSR. And when we talk about a war of ideas, we're talking about the US and capitalism and democracy versus the USSR, which is communist and the government is a dictatorship. So these are super duper opposite kind of approaches to life, both economically and politically. Um, so that's really kind of the story here. The other part of this is the constant looming threat of nuclear war. After the United States drops two atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II in the Pacific theater, the world has changed forever because now nuclear war is a reality. And this is a thing that can happen. And the technology advances really, really fast with regard to nuclear weapons, and the devastating impacts that they are capable of increase exponentially in very short amounts of time. So when we talk about the threat of nuclear war, we talk about a nuclear war that could end, humankind, not just destroy a city. So the fear and the paranoia is certainly there. Um, the reason that these two sides don't get along essentially is because capitalism and communism cannot coexist. They are different ideas altogether. They go against each other. It's like both of them trying to exist together is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. They just don't work. Um, so at the end of World War II, Germany's new punishment is we're going to dismantle their government entirely, and they're not even going to be allowed to govern themselves. So Germany is going to be split up amongst the Allies, and this sets the stage for the first kind of ideological conflict between the U.S. and the USSR that will begin the Cold War. So we said in the previous slide that Germany is separated between the Allies, and you can see that here on the left. And you can also see that the city of Berlin is divided amongst the Allies also. The city of Berlin is located here entirely within Soviet-controlled East Germany. Okay? So you can see how the city of Berlin itself is partitioned. This is the Soviet section in this, in here, and here's French, British, and American sections of Berlin right next door. Now, keep in mind, this entire city lies within Soviet-controlled territory, so this brings certain difficulties to the fore. The location of Berlin within East Germany leads to tons of challenges. For starters, the Russians, the Soviet Union's not particularly keen on assisting the U.S. in any way. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to make it really, really hard for the United States to send supplies and goods and all kinds of things to their section of Berlin. So they cut off supply lines essentially. And what the United States does is they basically say, okay, you want to block all the highways and the rail lines that lead to the American sections of Berlin and make it really hard for us to deliver stuff. We got a solution for that. Try this. And basically, what we do is we start delivering supplies and goods via cargo plane and pushing stuff right out of the back of these planes and basically just airdropping them right into our section of Berlin. This is called the Berlin Airlift. So it's literally fly in, drop the stuff, turn around, leave. And we were putting everything out of the back of these planes, essential and non essential goods, medical supplies, food rations, but also chocolate, toys, games, things like that also. So we were literally pushing everything out of the back of these planes. So this is the first kind of, little friction between the United States and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union eventually realizes that it doesn't work and they kind of give up on this plan. The next part of this story is really about what's called the Berlin Wall. In an attempt to separate and isolate the people from each other, the Soviet Union commissions the building of the Berlin Wall, which is a lot more than just a wall, but it's a wall between East and West Berlin that is designed to keep the communists on one side and the capitalists on the other side. The USSR will say that the capitalist lifestyle in Western Berlin, the sections of Berlin that are controlled by the U.S., they're going to claim that the capitalist lifestyle is a threat to the way of life for communist Easterners, and that's why they build the wall. In reality, the wall is to prevent communists from escaping communist East Berlin and escaping to the West, because that's going to look really bad. Because if this whole thing is about, the US versus USSR, and on the world stage you see people fleeing and running away from the USSR, the USSR is not going to stand a chance with regard to defeating the US in the Cold War. So they need to control that image, and they do that by building the wall to prevent people from escaping. So that's the deal with the wall. The wall is going to become a symbol of the Cold War moving forward. It's built in, the beginnings of it are built in 1961, and it's going to last. It's not going to get taken down until 1989, pretty much. Okay, so that's a long time, 30-something years. It takes on various forms. It starts as just a concrete wall, but the thing about this wall is it separates families, friends, neighbors from each other, etc. So think of some of you who might have family on the other side of town or something like that. They build this wall, all of a sudden you don't see those people for 30 years. So that was literally the reality of this. So it's a scary time for a lot of people. And you can see the wall is a lot more than just a concrete wall. There's barbed wire up top and so on and so forth. These are children playing around on it. On the western side of the wall, the side of the wall that faces democratic capitalist America, became a huge canvas for graffiti. So there's a lot of cool stuff on that. I included a video in the Google Classroom assignment. It's a minute and a half, and it deconstructs the Berlin Wall because, like I said, it's a lot more than just a wall. This video is really, really cool. So take the 2 minutes and watch it. It's pretty impressive. And last but not least, the next thing is kind of what happens to the rest of Europe. World War II, destroys a lot of Europe. So the United States comes up with a couple of ideas called the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine. One is the Marshall Plan that we will rebuild anything, any country that wants to be rebuilt. We'll pay for that as long as they promise to be capitalist and democratic. So what this whole Cold War business is about is the struggle. It's a tug of war. Is the world going to become capitalist and democratic, or is the world going to become communist and run by dictatorships? So this is one strategy that the United States uses to try to help capitalism and democracy win. Another one is the Truman Doctrine. Any country that is currently democratic, the United States will step in and protect the governments and the peoples of those countries against communist takeover, whether it be from groups inside of that country or from foreign invasion. So these ideas are in place to stop the spread of communism, and we'll talk more about that later. Overall, this increases tension between the U.S. and the USSR, and this whole series of events immediately following World War II really set the stage for the Cold War moving forward. Now, just to keep in mind, I usually would have taken all of this content and spread it out over 2 or 3 days, okay? But the fact of the matter is, in an attempt to try to kind of get you guys all the most important aspects of each of these lessons in each of these units, we're going to summarize and kind of compile stuff into smaller spaces. Um, you know, if and when we go back, hopefully we'll be able to kind of go over this stuff and digest it a little bit more, effectively the way that we're used to. But for right now, this is where we're at. So I encourage you guys to use the live Google Doc or the Google Meet, whichever wins the vote. I gotta check later. To communicate with me if you have questions about this stuff. But other than that, these are kind of the basics that we will start with. And if you guys want to move on to the worksheet, you should have everything you need there to complete that. So I'm around on the classroom at our scheduled times, and just let me know if you guys need help with anything. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.